Bocchi the Rock is an anime about a socially anxious high school girl who wants to start a band, and while she struggles to find friends in the first episode, the rest of the series focuses on her journey with this group of girls as she grows in her own confidence and develops the new friendships that she's found. It's a really cute and wholesome anime with some good music which pairs well with the story. However, the moment you decide to want to join the community surrounding Bocchi the Rock, the moment you start looking up some of the fan art for this anime, yes, there's a lot of wholesome stuff, there's a lot of talent within this community. However, the deeper you dig, the greater the depths of depravity that you'll find. Bocchi the Rock is an example of an anime which really utilizes the special bond and camaraderie that same-sex friendships possess, yet the degeneracy of its community is one which is indicative of the sin in which the world around us celebrates and revels in. When Christians are asked about secular arguments against homosexuality, one could argue the greater rate of HIV transmission amongst homosexual men, the disproportionate level of violence experienced between same-sex couples, and one could argue these as possible signs that while these things are also seen amongst heterosexual couples, the disproportionality of these things seen amongst same-sex couples indicates that there is something wrong about these relationships which correlates to a higher propensity for these negative effects to occur. For the sake of protecting these people, at the very least, the government should not encourage such behavior because it would result in negative impacts for homosexual people. For the greater community, it would not benefit us either to encourage such behavior, as society may seek to be as conducive as possible to the procreation of children in order to hit the 2.1 replacement rate needed for a country's population to continue to sustain itself. For a society to maintain all of its structures, economy, and its way of life, creating an environment which encourages and makes it easier to have children is a greater good that a society may want to strive for. The encouragement of heterosexual behavior over homosexual behavior wouldn't bring us all the way to a complete prohibition of homosexuality, but we can demonstrate from a secular point of view that a society may not want to encourage such behaviors. If we can make these observations from natural revelation, that we can derive this conclusion from what we can witness without special revelation, the non-Christian is given a good stepping stone to accept the Christian sexual ethic. Taking a look at the homosexual problem through a biblical lens, it's not as if it's some arbitrary prohibition that God's just made. Just like any other prohibition that he set out in the Bible, it is ultimately out of love for us and to protect us from the consequences of sin. There's a reason why marriage is between one man and one woman, and there's a reason why sex has to stay within the bounds of such a marriage. Jesus doesn't just say this in Matthew 19 for no reason. He says in verses 4 to 6, "Haven't you read," he replied, "that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female, and said, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore what God has joined together, let no one separate." While the context of this passage is Jesus answering a question regarding divorce, the basic principle and purpose of marriage that was outlined in Genesis is reaffirmed by Jesus in him quoting this passage. While we are no longer under the Old Testament law, we're still able to see what God's feelings and attitudes are towards homosexuality. In Leviticus 18:22, do not have sexual relations with a man as one does with a woman, which is within a greater context of prohibitions on sexual relations between a son and his mother, between a man and his sister, between a man and his granddaughters, between a man and his neighbor's wife. There's also a verse beforehand prohibiting the sacrifice of children to the god of Molech, and yet we get caught up with verse 22, happy to accept the greater context, but unwilling to accept this one verse out of some desire to coddle those who are in sin. It also doesn't surprise me that the modern LGBT movement is moving towards this direction of accepting and wanting to promote polygamy and polyamory, because that's the core concern of this passage in Leviticus, of reflecting God's attitudes towards marriage and sexual relations. So we can so clearly and evidently see what God's design is for marriage and for romantic relationships. relationships. It is a design which is in itself good and pulls back the excesses of lust to create this safe environment for which sexual behavior can be most fully experienced. And then comes homosexuality, which is behavior which perverts what God designed to be good. It goes further beyond what should have just stayed as a friendship, what should have just remained within the realms of brotherhood or sisterhood among men and women, and homosexuality perverts this into a notion which is just so antithetical to the design for man and woman which God has given us. There are multiple places in the Bible that talk about not sexual love, but the unique love that one may have for one's friends. A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a time of adversity. One who has unreliable friends soon comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. If either one of them falls down, one can help the other up, but pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. This is why I started this video with Bocchi the Rock, and it's just like any other anime like Lycoris, Recoil, or Girls Last Tour, where these anime don't have the motive of promoting and pushing lustful intent. These are anime where the camaraderie amongst friends, the non-sexual love for one's friends, is most exemplified. We see in Bocchi the Rock the growth that a socially anxious girl may experience after she steps forward amongst people who are willing to journey with her in the field of music. A girl who could have never imagined playing guitar to a small high school crowd, going out on a day trip to a nearby town, having a part-time job that involves talking to people, and even just having friends come over to her place. These are purely friendships which have become so perverted within a fandom which is just so sexually depraved that they impart their feelings of lust upon an anime which doesn't even intend that. We see in Lycoris Recoil the classic trope of very optimistic happy person meeting a very pessimistic angry person, and that angry person slowly learning to open up, to be silly, not to take everything as seriously as she's done in the past. The friendship between Takena and Tisto is one where Takena slowly but surely learns that friendship is something which strengthens someone to care about things which really do matter. Yet the fans of this show, upon realizing that the series wasn't going to end with the two of them entering a romantic relationship, started sending death threats to the creators of the anime, because again, it's the degenerate trying to project and mirror their degeneracy upon something which doesn't intend to be degenerate. I think one of the main reasons why God has set out certain prohibitions on sexual behavior in place is because he anticipated if we all leaned into our sexual proclivities, into behavior which is so degenerate and impure, that our perceptions of relationship itself would become so sexualized that it becomes something unrecognizable. The quote from C.S. Lewis continues to ring true, that those who cannot conceive of friendship as a substantive love, but only as a disguise or elaboration of eros, betray the fact that they have never had a friend. That is the response I have as a Christian towards homosexuality. There is a given purpose for same-sex friendship, one that we don't have to figure out from special revelation, one we can discern as a result of natural revelation. Yet to move past friendship and surrender to one's lust, I should think, is one of the greatest perversions of God's good design. It's in this I have the same response as Hitorigoto towards Kita's desire to be homosexual. If you're new here on the channel, I'm Podcast-san, and we talk about the Christian themes that we can find from all sorts of anime. I've actually done a more in-depth video on Bocchi the Rock, which you can watch right here.